In Europe, I do believe we are at the forefront of climate change adaptation. We have a common strategy since 2013, and several countries have already their own national strategies and action plans. Several initiatives are taking place involving governments, business, cities, decision makers. That's why ECCA is so important for us. In terms of outcomes, I would say first, we will be able to state where we are in climate change adaptation in Europe, update this knowledge, and link better with disaster risk reduction and mitigation initiatives. Second, knowing better where we are, we can better address the gaps. Third, in an inspiring and collaborative environment, we will better commit for action.
Lisboa is strongly committed with climate action. In the last decade, a strong effort started to be made with large investments, not only in climate mitigation, but with climate adaptation measures. Lisboa intends to be flood resilient until 2030, and a strong drainage plan is in action. For this, Lisboa elected green infrastructure as a valuable climate tool to respond consistently with low budget to these challenges. Trees play a decisive role in temperature decreasing. Green can act directly where people live and at the same time provide a range of ecosystem services such as recreation, air pollution removal, acting to increase quiet areas and biodiversity.
We planted 100 trees 100 days before the beginning of ECCA to offset the carbon footprint of the conference. Lisbon is one of the best cities to live. Some examples are the investment in green and blue infrastructures, cycling network in terms of water quality and recycling, and in terms of early warning systems, and finally, sharing good practice with all of the world.
What I wish is that we are all inspired by ECCA 2019, and each of us can take the best insights, the best knowledge, and be the best ambassadors of the key messages, knowing that only through collaboration can make the difference. Let's take this opportunity.
Bem-vindos a Portugal.
Welcome to Lisbon.
Bem-vindos à ECCA.
For millions of years, the Earth, the climate, has been a roller coaster, thrown into glaciations one after the other, until only 11,000 years ago, something special happened. The climate came to rest, the start of the Holocene. All the big civilizations emerged in that window of opportunity, and humanity thrived. Without knowing it, surprisingly, over the past centuries, we probably even prevented the Earth from slipping into a next glaciation. We have changed the way the planet works. And now we have to change the way we think about it too. Because if we don't, we'll slip into a hothouse Earth, a very different state, without ice caps, in which it will be very difficult to adapt in any case. That, in a nutshell, was the story we wrote in a scientific article that was published last year. It was called Trajectories of the Earth System in the Anthropocene. And today, before starting the conference with all the talking, we invite you to reflect on the 3 possible climate states we can really have. Only 3. The icy Earth, the hothouse Earth, and the fragile state in between that if we get our act together in time, we will be able to stabilize. And that state is the state within which we will be able to do the adaptation. So while I do the soundscapes, Tone Bjordam will bring each of the 3 worlds to life for you in her microcosms, for the first time live on stage, projected big, so you can see each of the micro things she is creating there. For the next 10 minutes, just sit back and let your mind wander about the possible futures.
Tuna Borgium and Martin Scheffer, there are many ways to raise awareness, and that was one of them. Art is extremely powerful. There are very different ways of giving a message, and I can only commend, which I have never done before in my life as a conference moderator, the organizers for understanding how important that message is. Talking, decisions are very important, and that is what is about to happen in this beautiful auditorium here in Lisbon and on this stage. But art has a very real place. It's an international language that reaches minds past the mind and into the heart and the soul of our cultures, of our civilization. Welcome to this 4th European Climate Change Adaptation Conference. Those of you who are not yet seated, please take your seats. You are welcome. You are from very many countries and you are from all over the world. Of course, a lot of EU representation, but you are from many, many countries. My name is Bénédicte Pavio. I'm half French, half British. I'm a journalist. I used to work at the BBC. I work for France 24. And never has climate change been so high in the list of priorities, not just politically, but also now in the media. It has become mainstream, and so it should. I would say long live art, and I hope I can say long live our planet. And that is what we are here to discuss today. So this very special conference has sold out. You are researchers, you are policymakers, practitioners, students, public and private institutions, and of course also the media. You are participants from 5 continents, Australia to South Africa, to France, to the USA, to South Korea, Japan, India, and many, many more besides. And what we have witnessed in the last months and particularly weeks is a real concern from young people across Europe, and as indeed I live in London. London was paralyzed for 8 or 9 days by very big protests, drawing the attention of the media, not just in Britain, but making international headlines. And that sends a very strong message too. And that requires working together to prepare for change. And that is what we are here for. And we have an extraordinary 3 days together, both on stage, and I will remind you the importance and the opportunities of your mixing and mingling. You will never have this combination of people again. Please make the very best use of this in the coffee breaks, in the parallel sessions, in every exchange that you have. Because if you speak to somebody, even if it's for a few minutes, you are more likely to phone them, text them, email them, WhatsApp them, tweet them, etc. So please engage in that dialogue. You will help your work and all kinds of other people's works. So this opening plenary is entitled Europe is at Risk, Adapting to Extremes, and that is what we're about to explore. So I'm going to invite some very special people onto the stage. And if they would come up, as I ask them to, up on these steps, and then sit next to me, please. João Matos Fernandes, the Portuguese Minister of Environment and Energy Transition. Please make your way up to the stage. Christos Stylianides, European Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Management from the European Commission. Fernando Medina, Mayor of Lisbon. Daniella Jacob, Climate Service Center Germany from JEREX. And Yvonne Slinkenberg, Director, please help me to thank them. Director of International, so if you would take the second seat, no, from the end, second, and then third, and then along here, wonderful. And I was just saying, Yvonne Slinkenberg, you are Director of International Mainstreaming and Policy Coordination, Directorate General for Climate. Yvonne, if you would sit here, please. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry. Now, of course, I would ask you to put your mobile phones on silent. That is important. Those other phone calls can wait till later. I would say that Wi-Fi is all in capitals ECCA 2019, and the password, which I like a lot, is time, spelt with a capital T, the digit 2, and adapt, time to adapt. And of course, you can tweet at ECCA 2019. So, without further ado, I am going to ask João Matos Fernandes, the Portuguese Minister of Environment and Energy Transition, to kick the proceedings off from his lectern. Please welcome him.
Good morning to everyone. Be welcome, first of all, my dear Fernando. It's a pleasure that you are here with us. My dear Commissioner, Christos, and all the others who are in the room. It's really a pleasure. Be welcome to Portugal. My first words are, naturally, for those who made it possible for us to be here today. First of all, the men and women that are behind the 3 European projects, Placard, Bingo, and Rescue, that have come together to apply for the organization of this conference in Lisbon. They had the dream and the will to make this conference a reality. Then, the European Commission, of course, for choosing Lisbon as the host city for this edition of ECCA, and last but not the least, all the supporters of this initiative from its early beginning. In this case, a special word must be addressed to the municipality of Lisbon for its strong commitment with this project. It is with great pleasure that Portugal hosts the 4th European Climate Change Adaptation Conference. My ministry was also enthusiastic of this project since its early beginning. We were fully convinced that bringing this conference to the south of Europe will be a great opportunity to share the specific challenges southern countries are living when we think on climate change adaptation. Ladies and gentlemen, much have evolved since scientists started exploring the different dimensions of climate change. The knowledge on this subject grew exponentially since then, and we have today plenty of information and tools to address these greatest challenges of all times. Unfortunately, the deeper we go, the more we acknowledge the extent and urgency of action to address climate change. The IPCC special report brings to light new evidence on the current and future impacts of climate change, the need to respect the 1.5 degrees limit. It also makes it clear that we are already observing the impacts of climate change aggravated by the fact that there isn't still a global response to assure the Paris Agreement goal to limit global warming below 1.5 Celsius degrees. Hold the global temperature below this limit and avoid major impacts requires rapid and far-reaching changes across all economic sectors. Not acting is not an option. Climate change is not just a problem of future generations anymore. It is a current problem as we are already facing its impacts. The last 4 years were the hottest we can remember. The average global temperature has already raised more than 1 degree Celsius when compared with pre-industrial levels, and climate change effects are happening everywhere, having as a consequence extreme weather events whose magnitude and frequency is growing. Nature is facing an unprecedented decline. Science has also confirmed that climate change is among the main causes for biodiversity loss. Ecosystems, which are the guarantee of our economy and well-being, are severely threatened by the impacts of climate change. In the beginning of May, Europe has overcome the threshold of resources that can be used, the overshoot date. If consumption of resources in the rest of the world was comparable to that of Europe, by May the 10th, no resource would remain to guarantee our society needs. This message is being passed to civil society and policymakers. Just last week, we had another student climate strike within the international movement in place that is gaining more and more momentum. Also last weekend, the European elections took place, and climate change was one of the main themes addressed by the different parties. It is becoming clear that climate change will have a high transformational impact in our society and will determine the development for the years ahead. In general, people are becoming more and more aware of the implications to their daily lives, but this message still needs to be emphasized. For the Portuguese government, this aspect becomes evident through the elaboration of the Roadmap for Carbon Neutrality 2050. This exercise gave us a glimpse of the fact and far-reaching transitions in the main systems of our society needed to attain this ambitious but challenging objective in a just and cost-effective manner. This initiative started 3 years ago at COP23 in Marrakesh, where the Portuguese Prime Minister assumed the commitment to reach carbon neutrality in Portugal by 2050. We were the first country in the world to do so. To become carbon neutral, we have to improve the value of our territory and ecosystems, take advantages and opportunities, namely on indigenous resources for renewable energies, and we need to become more circular and efficient in the way we produce and consume resources. In order to prosper, well within the limits imposed by our natural system, it is fundamental to effectively integrate all the drivers that will guide our development. In this sense, we will evolve in our environmental policy design using 3 connected goals. First, decarbonize society and promoting the energy transition. Second, valuing our territory and assuring its resilience. And third, move towards a more circular economy. That said, climate change represents a double challenge for Portugal. A mitigation challenge, because we are fully committed to reach carbon neutrality in 2050, and an adaptation challenge. As we know that climate change impacts are already and will continue to prevail, even with significant progress on the reduction of global emissions in greenhouse gases, which are crucial to reduce future adaptation costs. Portugal is highly affected by climate change in the European context, having a significant variety of impacts and vulnerabilities. To extreme weather events such as heat waves and droughts associated to rural wildfires and desertification. We also have a coastline very vulnerable to erosion, intensified by the sea level rise and by several storms with strong winds and heavy rainfall. So, we consider we have almost the full picture in terms of negative impacts. Although climate change impacts all sectors of activity, water management is at the center of our adaptation concerns. In recent years, drought events in Portugal have become more frequent and more intense. Therefore, there is a sense of urgency in dealing with this issue. This is also a great opportunity to promote water transition based on awareness raising for saving water, promotion of efficient use of this scarce resource, and promotion of water circularity through reutilization. Conscious of the challenges, Portugal was a pioneer at European level when adopted the first national adaptation strategy in 2010. With program Adapt Portugal, was able to improve knowledge on adaptation to climate change at local level and developed the first set of local adaptation to climate change strategies and plans, and the creation of a network of municipalities to deal with adaptation to climate change. Capacity building was also an important deliverable of this program and is now supporting further action. Presently, we are in position to adopt our National Adaptation Action Plan for 2030, aiming at implementation of concrete measures and monitoring its effectiveness. This action plan identifies the main sectorial adaptation measures to face the most relevant vulnerabilities in our territory and economy, along with measures to enhance resilience. It will be crucial to create the necessary framework to finance these measures, and to find innovative and effective ways to ensure the integration of adaptation issues into our daily routines and into sectoral planning at all sectors of society. This must be done in an integrated manner in order to potentiate the benefits to sustainable development and poverty reduction, reducing also inequalities. It must be done in articulation with all actors from municipalities, regions, government and non-state actors such as companies and NGOs. The challenge ahead requires a close articulation between science, practices and policies, so we welcome the effort to bring those different actors to this conference. Uncertainty can no longer be a barrier for action. Instead, it must become just another variable on project design and decision-making. I hope this edition of ECCA will be a landmark in Europe adaptation, providing an enabling field for cooperation and knowledge sharing where new bridges can be established. Many solutions improved while leading the way to put them in place. A very successful ECCA 2019 to all of you, and thank you.
Stay there. Can you stay at the lecterns? I'd like to ask you a question. The first of many. Yes, I was listening to what you were saying. How can the EU actually intervene as a major player in this adaptation process?
Well, we have to understand that each country has its own problems. So it's very normal that each country have its own project for adaptation. We understand that the temperature is rising. It makes a big difference in different territories. But all the territories are different, and there are no unique solutions. When you are talking about territory, you do have to have different solutions. But of course, the EU can have here a very important role. First of all, understanding that adaptation is really a priority, and we have to invest a lot, and it's an investment that will never end. When we are talking about the coastal line in Portugal, we are only using natural engineering in the works that we are doing, and those works will never end. And at the same time, if we want to improve the capacity of sink the CO2, we do have to reduce, it's in our roadmap, we have to reduce for a half the area that burned each year in rural fires. And there's a lot of prevention in here, of course, but I think that the European countries have to work together also to fight these rural fires.
I think you'll find that some of those things are mentioned in the next speaker's intervention. In your speech, you also mentioned the need to enhance what you called the articulation, perhaps the cooperation between science, practices, and policies. What's the best way of doing that?
When we set our goal to be carbon neutral in 2050, and when we wrote our roadmap, we only use technologies that we already know and technologies that we know that will become mature in just a few years. And we can be neutral on 2050. But it's very obvious that the science is really important in here, and it's really important to, at the same time, make this a just transition. So we do need the science to have new solutions, to have cheaper solutions that can help the will that the Portuguese society have, and I do believe that European society have, to be carbon neutral by 2050.
João Matos Fernandes for now. Thank you very much indeed. So let's carry on with you, Christos Stylianides. You're a European Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Management. And goodness knows there's a lot of crisis management needed. And of course, that's for the European Commission. We look forward to your opening remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Dear Minister, dear friend, João Pedro, Mayor of Lisbon, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. First of all, thank you so much for your kind invitation to be here with you at this really very important and very timely conference. Today, we are here to talk about the greatest challenge of our century, climate change. And dear colleagues, the science is clear. There is no room for doubt. Climate change is our new reality. It's not fake news. And it is responsible for more frequent and intense environmental shocks. Raging forest fires in Northern Europe, extended droughts in Africa, extreme cyclones in the Pacific, devastating floods in Asia. These natural disasters inflict catastrophic consequences all across the world. Last year alone, climate change caused the death of more than 5,000 people and drove 29 million to displacement and hunger. Climate change also devastates societies, crushing economies, and wiping out critical infrastructure. The message is clear. No country is immune to climate change. No country can deal with the enormity of this challenge alone. So we must act together. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we face a clear choice: prepare for climate change today, or pay a devastating price tomorrow. Obviously, now is the time to adapt to this new reality of climate change, to mitigate the impact, to reduce the risk, and to bolster our resilience. Preparing today will pay off tomorrow. So, your question, dear Benedict, what is the European Union doing in this global fight against climate change? The European Union is taking a long-term approach with our strategy on adaptation to climate change, and we are focused on three key priorities. First, enacting knowledge-based policies. We must refine our knowledge about climate change. This means collecting reliable data on disaster risk. For example, the EU's Copernicus Earth Observation Program will help us to do this. Copernicus is a state-of-the-art satellite system that improves our climate forecasting and risk analysis. And today's conference, I strongly believe, is another good example. The value of sharing knowledge, exchanging best practices, and learning from each other's success stories. Our second priority is to strengthen public and private cooperation. Climate change affects the whole spectrum of infrastructure and economic activities in both the public and private sectors. I believe the public-private partnership, the well-known PPP, must be our next big step forward. The public sector alone simply cannot address the enormity of the challenge. We need to better engage with the private sector, their experience, their efficiency, and innovation to find answers to these complex global problems. Consider the insurance sector. Insurance not only provides financial compensation for losses, but also incentives to reduce risks. Flexible insurance schemes, for instance, can be especially beneficial to the most vulnerable countries. So, the European Union is committed to climate and disaster risk financing and insurance. We support programs like the Insure Resilience Initiative and similar programs at the regional level. Third priority focuses on resilient investments and infrastructure. Risk-informed investment are a smart and sustainable way to safeguard societies from the effects of climate change. This means new infrastructure must be built right in the first place. This is very important. And after disaster strike, infrastructure must build back better. This is another great challenge. Risk-proof infrastructure and livelihoods reduce the risk of dangerous migration, poverty, environmental degradation, and uncontrolled urbanization. The EU's action plan on financing sustainable growth concentrates on environmental and social aspects of all our sustainable instruments. Currently, 1 out of 5 euro of European budget supports climate change. 1 out of 5. 40% of funding under the European Fund for Strategic Investment goes to projects on climate action. 40%. So, no complacency, but Europe is leading by example. With concrete action, dear colleagues, I strongly believe that climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction must be closely connected policy areas, and they should be addressed in parallel. That means building bridges between disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation at both policy and operational levels. This will help ensure the security and the resilience of our economies and societies. Many effective practices already exist across Europe, funded through the European Structural and Investment Funds, the LIFE, for example, program for the environment, and the Horizon 2020 program for research and innovation. And there are many more examples in European humanitarian and development assistance. In fact, more than 65% of all EU humanitarian projects, I know well because this is my field, include disaster preparedness activities. Dear friends, citizens are organizing around climate change, coming together to send a clear message to their governments, demanding strong action against climate change. We must respond, and we have responded with RESC-EU, our upgrade to the European Civil Protection Mechanism that bolsters our prevention and preparedness and strengthens our response to natural disasters. RESC-EU has entered into force and now is ready for action. RESC-EU strengthens our civil protection in 2 critical ways. First, RESC-EU strengthens Europe's collective response to disasters by establishing an additional reserve of most needed assets, especially firefighting planes and helicopters, with mobile field hospitals to follow. Rescue, more or less, is a safety net available when national capacities and resources are overwhelmed, and leaving no country alone in times of disasters and emergencies. And second, RESC-EU bolsters our prevention and preparedness by helping our member states strengthen their risk assessment and risk management, and rescue will build a European culture of prevention from the ground up. And RESC-EU will streamline how we share knowledge, expertise, and best practices through our new instrument, Civil Protection Knowledge Network. Rescue entered into force last March. Now we are in the transition period. Member states are already participating in this transition, offering firefighting planes and helicopters to our rescue reserve. And with the EU covering most of the costs. For example, 75% for any operational cost, and 90% for any new equipment by our member state. So we are building Rescue right now to be ready to this summer's forest fire season. And frankly speaking, for me, Rescue is an excellent example of European solidarity in practice, tangible European solidarity. Dear colleagues, natural disasters know no borders, nor should our solidarity, which is why cooperation, especially in the field of civil protection, is so important. The European Civil Protection Mechanism is a perfect example of regional cooperation between our member state, EU member states, and the 6 participating states. Most recently, the mechanism responded to Cyclone Idai in Mozambique. Portugal has real engagement there. 6 countries offered medical, food, rescue, and communication assistance. As I said, Portugal was among the first responders. Thank you so much, dear Minister, for your engagement in this very difficult situation. Just to conclude, dear friends, when it comes to climate change, we are all in the same boat. Facing a truly global challenge. And this is why we require global solutions. The decision we take today will impact the lives of millions tomorrow in Europe and across the world. My modest message, let's step up and do the right thing today, right now, together. Thank you so much.
You say that rescue is the best demonstration of European solidarity in practice. What is the actual added value of rescEU in economic terms?
As always, dear Benedict, we know well that this is the European EU added value, because rescEU is the definition of the economy of scale. Why? All of us, we realize that we need each other when we have this new phenomena due to climate change. And for example, something very specific, if we decide country by country to increase national capacity resources, for example, planes and helicopters, if we see totally this amount, maybe across Europe, we need more than 500. If we are going through rescEU, this collective response, we need less than 30. So it is the definition of the economy of scale. What we need? Better coordination, better knowledge sharing, and better solidarity. And this is the ambition of rescEU. And I'm sure, because of my experience as Commissioner, not only in South Europe, but also in Sweden last summer, where we saw the most devastating forest fires in Europe. And there, the Swedish people, they realized the necessity to be together, the necessity of togetherness, and of course, they realized the tangible European solidarity in a very difficult way. So rescEU is our answer to the urgent needs of the climate change, but also is part of our holistic strategic approach to climate change.
Thank you very much indeed for those opening remarks, Christos Iliadis, and also for that response. Thank you. Solidarity in action. All right, and now for our third speaker, Fernando Medina. First, I want to say obrigada. Thank you very much for this beautiful auditorium. And I hope that a lot of us will be enjoying the day and also the nights in Lisbon, because I hear there are some very good addresses. Perhaps we can all ask the volunteers who have very kindly volunteered their time and each other and the locals where to go. So, Fernando Medina, Mayor of Lisbon, we look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you.
Dear Minister, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me say you a very warm welcome to all to the city of Lisbon. I'm not going to use my time to be a touristic guide to offer my services, but after the conference, I can give some tips for the ones that are going to visit the city.
Great, we're looking forward to them already.
Yes, you are the first on the list. Let me thank you, all of you, for coming here to Lisbon, and to say you very honestly, that is a great privilege to have this conference, very important conference here in Lisbon. Let me speak you mainly about 4 reasons why this conference and all this meeting of the people that are here today, it's important for us. First of all, in Lisbon, we have the clear conscience that the time for climate action is now. The time is now. We cannot wait to deal, to have the concrete actions, to have the attitude of changing, and to have the awareness of all the people to climate action. So what this conference makes this, and it is very important, is the raising the awareness of everyone, not inside this room, because everyone, I think, is more or less converted in this room to the cause, but to the other people outside this room, that the time for action is now. The second is that the battle of climate change is going to be won or lost in cities. Half of the population, of worldwide population, now lives in cities, and by 2050, 70% of the world population will live in cities. And if we compare about the production, the consumption, the economic activity, the numbers are even higher. 1/3 of the Portuguese population lives in the metropolitan area of Lisbon. Almost half of the population of Portugal lives in 2 big metropolitan areas, and this is similar to every developed country. So the battle is going to be won or lost in cities. The battle against climate change, and basically the battle also for the climate adaptation in the areas that changing is already happening, and it's going to happen in the future. Third of all, we need a global mobilization, and we need a local mobilization of all actors and all stakeholders to take this change. It's not possible to go by a central government to say how to do and to produce a lot of legislation. It is necessary, obviously, but it is not enough. It is not enough that the European Commission does its job, and it is doing well on this area. What we need a global and a mobilization of all stakeholders, because everyone on its field have a decisive role to make on climate action. We are talking about companies, we are talking about schools, we are talking about NGOs, we are talking about, obviously, governments, we are talking about cities. Cities, a lot of responsibility taking in cities. That's why when we were awarded as Green Capital, European Green Capital for 2020, we took a decision that our key role in Lisbon 2020, it was to make this year a great social movement of mobilizing the society for climate action. It's not about a show, let's say that we make publicity of things that what we are going to do, but basically we want to mobilize all the society, from companies to NGOs to schools, universities, research centers, for each one of them to make their own projects. Concrete actions, concrete projects. 1,000 projects for 2030. It's our main idea for Lisbon Green Capital. The fourth and the last idea that I would like to stress here is that we need concrete actions. We need to see the projects. We need to see, and we need to measure those projects. It's very important that we have political speaks about the problems. It's very important that we share together our experience, but it's also probably the thing that we can do differently from the common citizens, since that we have the power of being in a city hall, in a government, or in the European Commission, is that we have the power and the responsibility of concrete action. So I think the vision for Lisbon 2020 and the vision that we have put forward in our action in the city is the vision of we love to talk about the concrete actions and the concrete projects. And we want to speak to companies to say, what is your proposal? Don't tell me that you understand the problem. I hope that by now you understand the problem. Don't talk me about the general strategy. I hope by now you have read all the papers that are good strategies. Talk me about what can you do to solve this problem? What can you do to, what is your share of, what are you doing in your attitude, in your daily life to change reality and to adapt the reality for us to live better. My dear friend, Minister, you will not be not criticize me because I'm going to steal one of these phrases that I think it's very, very keen and very, very at central point that many people didn't realize. Climate change is not a problem for the planet. As we saw in the demonstration before, the planet has saw a lot of climate change during millions of years. Climate change is about our ability of live well in this planet. It's a problem for human beings because with rising temperatures, well, we are in Lisbon, a coastal city that easily can see the effects of the rising of water levels. We are in the area of North African winds, so it's very easy to see what could happen with rising temperatures and changing the speeds of winds and all things happen. So the question that we have to answer is what are we doing in concrete measures to deal with that, and how can we speak to everyone to raise the awareness and to ask for concrete measures. I will not discourse here about everything that we are doing. That would be completely a waste of time. But I would like to stress you 5 concrete projects that we are putting forward.
Yes.
5 concrete projects.
That was going to be my question. So this will be you've presupposed my question. So I was going to say to you, can you give me 1, but if you're going to give us 5, even better, concrete actions. And then I would like you to tell me 1 concrete thing you are doing in your personal life, not just as a mayor, to make a change.
Okay. First of all, one very important topic, 5. One very important topic is about water use. It's easy to understand the importance of water use in Portugal by our geographical position, about the proximity to North Africa. What we are doing is creating a recycling water network that could support us in not using normal water, normal consumption water for every issue day that the city has, like cleaning the streets or parks.
I had the pleasure of having one of your colleagues at a Green Week session a year or 2 ago in Brussels, and it was a very impressive presentation. So I know that is a concrete action. Okay, time is of the essence, so that's tick 1. What are the other 4 ticks we can give you of concrete action?
The second one is about flooding. The Commissioner highlighted that topic. I would like to use this time to thank the Commissioner for all his work during these years in Brussels, in this very sensitive area, but very, very important area. I would like to thank the Commissioner for the help in the situation on Mozambique, that it's clearly one of the cases that we can see that time is now, or probably in that case, time it was before, to have an action on preventing things. But the main issue about flooding is demanding us a very, very big project and a very big investment in how to deal with this reality. So we are putting forward a project with the support of the European Investment Bank that is worth more than 130 million euros to build the drainage plan. It's to build a system that could protect the city from the flooding. It's a system on the basis that is based on the natural parks and the natural reservoirs that we can build all around the parks and green infrastructure in the city. And then it is complemented by a system of tunnels that could retain waters, not allowing waters to come to down part of Lisbon. And then we can use that system to protect the city of Lisbon. So when we talk about climate action to prevent, what we are doing is preventing our way of living in the city of Lisbon. The third example is about composting, is to use what we have made now is to give people 1,200 composting machines that they have in their houses, in their gardens, to making their private composting. And then we are going to expand till 2020 to 4,000 composting machines in private areas, to private gardens, to private use. And we are going to make that network on public parks and other public areas for the use of that technology to use bio-waste could be used again on nature. Fourth example is about heating waves, heat waves. What we made in the last years was increasing dramatically the amount of area, of green area. And if you look at the map in Lisbon, this is a very difficult process because it's a very tough process because the city is not very big on area and the city is very consolidated in urban terms. So when we talk about green area, a lot of time what we are making is changing urban area for buildings and transforming it on green area for parks. We made 200 hectares already and we are continue. And in all the public works that we make to reduce cars and to have more public space, what we try to make is to make green the center part of this change. So all the attitude about urban planning, that is no different from major cities in the world that are making the same road. They are making the same road in New York, in Oslo, in many cities in the world. But the question here is to make in a very whole city, very consolidated city, and we change the way that people move in the city, putting a priority on walking, on bicycling, and on green parks. So we made the transformation of more than 20 areas in the city in a project that we call 1 square in each neighborhood. So if each neighborhood has not a very big road, but could have a narrow road with much more space for people to walk and to be together, we can win in different fronts. And planting trees, it's a reality that people want and like. Last one, and I'm going to finish right now, is about energy. Lisbon is the capital, the European capital, with more hours available with sun in a yearly basis. It's easy to understand why. We just go outside, we see a good effect of climate change, probably 30 degrees. The question that we haven't done enough on this area in the last years, and we are pushing for a big investment on this area. So we have a small project, I had to call it small on scale, but very important because it's going to be the beginning in our case, is that we are going to build a solar plant, a public solar plant that is going to be connected to the bus company. So the solar plant is going to put the energy to the buses that will going to be round and round in the city every day. So we can improve this to more capacity. Obviously, we are raising the standards on public housing for electrical production, but this project is a very good example that we could give. We want to give it to the city and to the private sector. So invest in energy production that you can put directly on our own resources, that is buses, and then probably after we can sell it, the energy that we don't use, to the grid at the same price that we consume. So this is just for ending. What I would like to say in this conference is to tell you about this very straight point. Act now, act all, mobilizing all, and mobilize all for concrete measures, concrete actions plan that we need to advance. Thank you very much.
Fernando Medina, thank you. Don't go. So I'd say to you, your slogan might be, ride the bus, ride the sun. And as far as what's your concrete action in your daily life?
Oh, a lot of
One
things.
tip, one thing you've changed in your life.
Well, difficult to say things that change, but the things that I make normally and my kids make normally, obviously about garbage selection, about using the public transport, planting trees, that is a personal and a mayor duty that we do in a normal basis.
And just to share with us, obviously there are a few people in the room, how much do you think, if you were being honest about, since you've become mayor, in percentage terms, have you learnt and become more aware? Have you raised your awareness about climate change?
No,
Would you say 50%?
Definitely more than that, because the
I was
question,
hoping, so how much would you say
but the
that
question
you've
is
become
that
more aware?
one central issue about climate change is that when we put climate change in a department, we are losing the battle. Because climate change is not a question of the environmental department that is somewhere in a hidden place in the organic of a very big city hall like city council like Lisbon. Climate change and climate adaptation have to be in the mayor's office. It is a question, because when I talk about approving buildings or not approving buildings, it's a question of climate action. When I talk about what are the requisitions for buildings to be approved, are they efficient or not in an energy terms, they have the best solutions for the use of water.
So I'm going to say,
this is not urban, this is a climate problem.
I'm going to say 100%. And thank you for your candor, because that's really important. In the same way that we don't section off scientists and section off researchers and section off policymakers and section off the media, it does require global solutions. You clearly care. Thank you very much for your hospitality and your remarks. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
I've got a feeling this conversation is going to continue off stage. Okay, settle down, gentlemen, because there are some women that I'd like to hear from. And the first one is Daniella Jacob, and you are climate service from the Climate Service Center in Germany. And you're going to talk to us, I think, a little bit about the IPCC official report. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
So thank you very much for the nice introductory words. Dear Minister, dear Mayor of Lisbon, commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, much has been said now. So I'm a bit puzzled, what should I tell you? We heard all those political, very important, very open, well understood the situation speeches. So I would take the liberty, and I thank you, the organizers, for this, that I get the opportunity to underpin what we just heard a little bit with science. And this is partly science which has been released at the IPCC special report for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. Some magic comes up. Yes, thank you.
So our first PowerPoint presentation.
Partly what you read, or everything what you can read, is original wording by IPCC. But please allow me some personal wording when I talk about it. So it is very clear that we are living in a changing climate. Climate change is already affecting. It's not working here, so it should work. Maybe you can go to the next slide. Climate is already affecting people, ecosystems, and livelihoods all around the world. Yes. This has been reported in the report, where more than 100 authors contributed. We looked at 6,000 studies, more than 1,000 reviewers commented, with 42,000 comments in several rounds of review, which we all answered. And you can read all of our individual answers to your comments in a nice Excel spreadsheet. So I'm pretty sure you have done it and looked into it. So next slide, please. It's a bit, so where are we now? The report clearly states that since pre-industrial times, global warming has increased by about a degree. This is not new to you. It also clearly states that within a time period of 50 years, 5 decades, we could observe a warming about half a degree. And with this warming, it has also been recorded that extreme events got more likely, more severe, and more frequent. Not all types of extreme events, but predominantly heat waves, heavy precipitation, and droughts. This is important to have in mind because another half-degree warming is very likely to add another change in extremes. And if you look at the still in scientific debates and under development, decadal prediction, they said that the summer temperature in the next 4 years in Europe is very likely to be 1 to 2 degrees warmer than the summer temperature of the last 4 years in Europe. And if you listen to the seasonal forecast 2 days ago, it says that large parts of Europe will face even a more strong heat wave this year than Europe faced last year, with also more heavy precipitation and flash floods. Currently, the rate of warming within a decade is 0.2 degrees. That's a statement from IPCC. If we would go on with this rate, we will pass the 1.5 degree aim by 2030 or 2050. The good news is that past emissions will not bring us there. Why is it so important that we care about the 1.5 degree aim? I talked already a little bit about the extreme events. Each extra bit of warming will worsen the impact, not only for severe heat waves in cities or crop losses. It will, of course, be very clearly lead to more damage, to more vulnerability in specific regions of the world. Not well adapted for those impacts is not a good idea for the future. The report clearly states that global population exposed to water shortages is up to 50% less if we limit warming to 1.5 degrees compared to pre-industrial times than 2 degrees. And what you can read here and what you can read in the report is giving you a detailed picture of the future. How would a 1.5 degree world look like compared to a 2 degree world? And if you, for example, look at sea level rise, it only says that you would save 10 centimeters of sea level rise. And you would say, oh, this is not much, and there are only 10 million people affected. But don't forget that it also affects the area of land and groundwater, which is getting more and more salty, so we lose area for food production. So I think what we heard before, that everything is connected, is very important. We might also experience in the future some limits of adaptation. And I was very pleased to hear the connection between the adaptation and the disaster risk reduction and the preparedness from the speakers before. So the report also says the good news is we can get there. We can limit warming to 1.5 degrees, but it takes something. We have to do a big transition, but it is not impossible. So the next 10 years are critical, and we have to reduce CO2 emissions by about 45% by 2030. We have to reach net zero by around 2050, and I'm very pleased to hear, at least in the last couple of weeks, that some action seems starting, let's put it this way. some good news. People are starting to discuss about mitigation and about action in mitigation. What would it require? It would require an unprecedented scale of change. A systems transition, deep emission cuts. We need a full range of technologies, behavioral changes, and of course an investment in low carbon options. And I think this is the good news, because the low carbon society is an innovative, dynamic, new, positive way of life. So I think the connection between adaptation challenges to limit impacts and vulnerability, to be prepared for future risks, and to adapt to a low-carbon lifestyle is a new challenge. Adaptation gets a new dimension. It is not only adapting to climate change risk or weather risks, it is also a challenge to adapt to the new lifestyle. Change and see the innovation in low-carbon society where we have much less people at risk. So the report clearly states that we can get there. And how can we get there? Limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees can go hand in hand with achieving other world's goals. We can achieve sustainable development together with disaster risk reduction and together with climate change adaptation when we tackle this in a systemic, positive, innovative, and open way together. Tackling climate change can be consistent with ensuring people around the world are healthy, prosperous, have food, clean water, and clean air. But there's no single recipe, and that's why we're here for success. It is really important that we share our expertise in adaptation and mitigation. Poorly designed policies, poorly designed adaptation options, and adaptation implementations can have unexpected and adverse consequences. We talk about them as trade-offs, but they are of course much more, because they hinder innovation and they hinder prosperity. So let me finish with the good examples and good connections which I see here at the ECCA. You might have heard that we have hosted one of the first ECCAs a couple of years ago, and I'm very pleased to see this kind of conference growing and growing and growing, and I would congratulate the organizers for such a tremendous, nice location and program, and I'm really hoping that you can share your knowledge, that you can share your expertise, and that you find new friends and new colleagues. So I'm positive that innovation is key for action and for achieving a low-carbon society, and we can do this together. So let's start a new way, a new movement, and let's join this and get engaged. Thank you.
Daniella, thank you very much. Stay there. Well, thank you very much for that perspective, and a positive one as well, and the combination of things you said. Two very quick questions. I'm afraid you've only got 2 minutes to answer both, and they will start as soon as I finish. Tick, tick, tick. How can European research react to these messages, and also what are the most important next steps? For who? For the ECCA community.
Most important is that the European research is not too diversified in applied and basic research. We need to fight fake news, so we need a solid science in the back in order to inform
let's just stop you there for 1
adaptation.
second. We need to stop fake news. That is such a momentous thing about climate change. Thank you. No, I meant stop in the thought. I didn't. Please carry on. The answer to the question.
The second part was about the ECCA.
Yes. What are
I
the
think-
next most important steps?
I think most important at the ECCA now is to overcome the time of discussion and knowledge sharing, and add on this the time for developing solutions and implementation. This means that we have to jointly to find ways for financing action in addition to financing research. So I think it's important that the ECCA is now spreading beyond the ECCA crowd, let's put it this way, and in each own location all over the world takes the good news from doable, utilizable, and I would say successful tries for adaptation and mitigation options, which then can be transferred to other regions with the expertise of those regions.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you. And now our fifth speaker, last but certainly not least, Yvonne Slingenberg, Director of International Mainstreaming and Policy Coordination, important word there, coordination, Directorate General for Climate Action from the European Commission.
Thank you very much, Dominique. So, dear Minister, dear Commissioner, dear Mayor, and of course, distinguished scientists, after all. It is also for me a real pleasure to be here today with you in the beautiful Lisbon at the European Climate Change Adaptation Conference. As you said, Daniella, from its beginning in Hamburg in 2013, we have been very pleased to see also this forum growing, and it is very important indeed for science to meet policy, because, you know, in our view, there is perhaps no greater challenge and more pressing issue than in need of sound science than climate change. Just to recall that also earlier this year, we heard from the World Economic Forum that one of the most threatening global risks, if not the most threatening global risk, is considered to be failure to tackle climate change, and of course the extreme weather events that we see around us. We are experiencing those impacts in Europe today, and it is exactly to those impacts that we are seeking to adapt. Now, it was already mentioned, 2018 was a record warmest year. We had all the spectrum. We had heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and also, for example, this very low water level in the River Rhine, which in itself is a communicating challenge to the German industry, for example. And this was unnavigable and therefore had great economic impact, just to show that there are real consequences that people start seeing. Climate change does affect us in numerous ways, in profound ways, from impacts on biodiversity, human health, to agriculture and industrial productivity. This year also started badly, I have to say. The forest fire season, when you look at statistics, it has really started much earlier than otherwise. We have seen already statistics on the first 4 months of 2019 that shows that there have been more forest fires than even in the whole of 2018. 11 times more than the 10-year average for this period of the first 4 or 5 months of the year, and also an expansion to areas where, you know, we didn't really see this kind of forest fires in the past, and we can think of Sweden, Latvia, and Germany. Now, let's talk about economic losses of these weather and climate-related extremes. This amounts to 12 billion euros a year, and this cost is clearly going to increase if we don't take further action. Now, the climate will continue to change in the coming years, and that also means that we will need to continuously adapt and increase our adaptation action, and therefore we need more knowledge about the impacts and indeed the concerted action that we can deploy. You have heard very interesting perspectives from the Commissioner on fighting disasters. Also, the city contribution is very important in our view. And of course, we're also working a lot on the Covenant of Mayors and to mobilize cities there. But let me focus a little bit on additional action that we do at the EU level. Now, of course, we have the 3 big frameworks. We have the Paris Agreement, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, and we also have the Sendai Framework, which together provide a very clear direction of travel for this future sustainable development. Now, at the European Commission, we do very much recognize, obviously, that climate change is the most pressing and challenging issue, as I said before. And we have been putting in place a very big package of legislation so that we meet and achieve our own commitments to reduce emissions of at least 40% by 2030 and thereby lead in this clean energy and low carbon transition. We have, and I think the Commissioner referred to it, also proposed at the end of last year what we call a long-term strategy for climate neutrality by 2050. And this is a huge transformational challenge for society and the economy at large. For that, we will need a wealth of new knowledge, innovative solutions to really make it happen. And we will need to, and that is our objective, to make Europe a role model that others can then follow and that can see that this is indeed a positive agenda full of opportunities. Now, we have been working on adaptation in the context of the 2013 Adaptation Strategy, and that was at the time when ECCA was itself created a significant step forward for EU policy. And the purpose, of course, already then was to make Europe more climate resilient, and we focused at the time on 3 specific actions. First of all, promoting action on adaptation by member states and cities. Also to really look at EU-level action from EU funds, so what are the things that we are funding with EU budget, and to make those climate-proof, to no longer go in directions where we fund investments which haven't been climate-proofed, and to also support better informed decision-making. Now, those 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was clear, but of course it is even clearer now that not acting will have costs. So early action will save costs, it will make it less costly, and it creates opportunities and thereby will accelerate investments and innovation. Now, you may have seen that we have done an evaluation of our EU adaptation strategy recently against these objectives, and we have come to the conclusion that it did provide valuable advice for where we want to take adaptation action at EU level towards 2050. We have made progress against each of the individual actions, again about knowledge gaps, better planning, and sharing best practices. But again, the need to adapt remains and has grown, and impacts of past emissions obviously will unfold and will continue to unfold, as I mentioned, through heat waves, storms, forest fires, and floods. So very importantly, the evaluation that we did also makes clear that we need to guarantee fairness. I think that was also one of the topics mentioned, not leave anyone behind. So from our perspective, we want to highlight the importance to also assess and basically map the social vulnerability to climate-related events, as well as to identify and involve and engage the vulnerable groups in the design of fair adaptation policies. So many local and regional actors tell us that indeed the socio-economic vulnerability and climate vulnerability layers in their maps, when they have the maps of these 2 issues, they often overlap. We do need to integrate better adaptation policy with other EU policies, and of course also in the international context. We certainly must channel more attention towards resilience in the private sector. Again, that was mentioned before, and it is indeed very, very important. For businesses, adaptation can also not be an afterthought. It has to be ingrained in, short-term, but also long-term decisions and investor choices. Supporting the policies that will effectively enable the success of our adaptation policy, again, will require new knowledge, absolutely excellent science, research, and also disruptive innovation leading towards the solutions that you mentioned, Daniella. And this is why the European Commission, under the Horizon Europe, the future post-2020 research and innovation program, has proposed a new tool, which we call missions. And these missions will have a mandate to really capture the imagination of European citizens at large. The concept being inspired by President Kennedy's Man on the Moon and set, to find solutions to some of the major challenges faced by the European citizens. Now, it is therefore no coincidence that, in setting up this mission, it has been agreed that climate change, adaptation, and societal transformation is indeed such a major challenge. Maybe not a man on the moon, but certainly around, men and women on the warming Earth. So also the mission on adaptation will be a high-profile initiative, clearly much more than just a research agenda. It will basically be a very important policy instrument and will play a central role in public policy across the European Union. It should address all relevant issues identified in the evaluation of the EU's adaptation strategy, and again, certainly zoom in on knowledge gaps and this search for solutions. Now, it is built like this, the program for ECCA, that at the closing session, you will hear more from Director General Jean-Éric Paquet of our Department on Research and Development about the adaptation mission also. But I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you all to apply to the call for expression of interest, to be part of the mission board. We're really seeking people from all over society to participate in that. And it has a very interesting and challenging task, which is to be defining the targets of the mission and, of course, then also making sure that we reach them. And this call was launched 2 weeks ago, but it is open until the 11th of June, so ample time for you all to sign up to that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, again, the scientists are telling us that it is not too late to take action, but that this action needs to happen now. And from my side, I can only urge you to continue to make your voices louder and to reach out indeed to policymakers across the board. And in the future, as ECCA will grow and continue to grow in importance and influence, I really hope that we can maybe also look at having a kind of ECCA declaration that could encapsulate, the key messages on adaptation from the scientific community to citizens and politicians. So a big thank you indeed to the organizer, to our hosts, the Mayor of Lisbon, and to the great team behind the organization of the conference this year. It looks excellent, and I look forward to continuing the close cooperation with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yvonne, I'm afraid the time is against us, but can I just ask you how that wealth of knowledge, because of course there are the all-important plenaries. Today's opening plenary, tomorrow's business plenary, and then the closing plenary, and they've all got very special features to them, so you can't afford to miss any of them. But there are, of course, the many, many parallel sessions. So how is this wealth of knowledge actually going to be captured and presented for ECCA, at ECCA?
Thank you, Dominique. Indeed, a very important question. I stressed a lot the fact that over the past years we have been really trying to collect knowledge, research, input, best practices. So this is what we hope to get out of the ECCA. And it is extremely important at this moment in time because, again, I think it has been mentioned, we have been having quite a good result of the European elections on Sunday. We do hope, and we're getting ready for additional ambitious action on climate change, both on mitigation and adaptation. So we want to really take all the knowledge that will be gathered in this conference away and use it to underpin any future actions and policies. That is extremely important. Now, I'm very unlucky because I'm actually flying back to Brussels this afternoon, but we do have quite a few colleagues. I think we're around 6. I see them in the front rows here from our Department on Climate Action in the European Commission. So they will spread throughout the different sessions and
actually,
we'll collect
all the knowledge. Could those delegates stand up so that other people know who they are? Sorry to embarrass you, but come on. No, stand up, stand up, stand up. Okay, so these are the people you need to talk to.
So we will make sure that definitely gets brought back.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Can I invite you to come back? Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here goes a few messages I'm going to give you. If you haven't already done so, please download the app. It is fantastic, and it's going to make your experience even richer, and you're going to be connected much more. We need you, and I invite you on behalf of the organizers to vote. Why? Because your vote counts, and in fact, you're going to help decide 3 awards that are going to be given. Best Student Oral Communication, Best Student Poster, and Best Young Artist. And you're saying to yourself, well, hold on, where's the poster, where's the student oral communication, and where's the Best Young Artist? Well, you will discover them later on, because I know that at 1 p.m. there's a lunchtime official launch, but you'll be able, if you miss it, because you're having lunch or an interesting conversation somewhere else, although I would invite you to go to that, there's a fantastic student arts exhibition, and that will be outside. So you get to vote, you get to experience it, see it, talk to the students, and then vote on it. Also, so those awards will be given out on Thursday at the closing plenary. Another thing to put in your diary, tonight from 1800 hours to 2000 hours, so if anybody doesn't understand that clock, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Lisbon time, there's a poster and drink reception today, and I understand that that is on floors 1 and 2. So drink will be involved, and chat and other things. I also, of course, invite you to go to parallel sessions. Most of you have already signed up. If you haven't, not a problem. And you can go to as many as you like. I also invite you to visit the stands. There are some really interesting research work and projects that are out there. And what will be very important is for you to talk to the volunteers. There are lots of people who have given up their time for free to be here, to guide you around the venue, to help you. And so that's going to be very important. And the mayor did offer to give us a few good addresses from Lisbon, so you should take him up on it. So I invite you to meet me again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for the business plenary, and our theme tomorrow, so that you can prepare for it, is adapting businesses to climate change, risks and opportunities. So we've begun exploring some of the risks, some of the opportunities, some of the concrete actions. Now, please help me to thank our excellent speakers.